Here's what has European allies in Ukraine on the edge of their seats. President Trump just made a promise that could either defuse or detonate the most dangerous diplomatic moment of his presidency. In a high-stakes conference call this Wednesday, President Donald Trump delivered what many are calling a crucial reassurance to European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The American leader explicitly stated that when he sits down with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this Friday, territorial concessions won't be on the table for discussion. This revelation comes from 5 separate sources, 2 European officials and 3 additional individuals who were briefed on the sensitive diplomatic conversation. But here's where it gets controversial. Can Trump actually stick to this promise once he's face-to-face with one of the world's most skilled manipulators? During Wednesday's call, Trump outlined his primary objective for the Putin summit, achieving an immediate ceasefire in the ongoing Ukraine conflict. For those unfamiliar with diplomatic protocol, a ceasefire typically means both sides agree to stop fighting temporarily, creating space for more comprehensive peace talks later. All participants on the call reached consensus that this ceasefire must happen before any serious peace negotiations can even begin. However, and this is the part most people are missing, several European leaders reportedly walked away from the conversation with a distinctly pessimistic impression. They sensed that Trump himself isn't particularly optimistic about what he can accomplish in Alaska. The timing of this diplomatic dance couldn't be more critical. European and Ukrainian officials have been experiencing what one might call diplomatic anxiety ever since Trump announced this Putin meeting last week. Their fears aren't unfounded. They're terrified that Trump and Putin might hash out the framework of a peace agreement behind closed doors, complete with territorial divisions, and then present Ukraine with a take-it-or-leave-it ultimatum. These concerns intensified dramatically after Trump's recent public comments suggesting there would likely be some land swapping between Russia and Ukraine. For Ukrainian President Zelenskyy and European leadership, those words sent chills down their spines. After all, we're talking about sovereign Ukrainian territory that Russia has occupied through military force. Yet Wednesday's call seemed to address these fears directly. All participating leaders apparently reached agreement on 2 non-negotiable principles. First, Ukraine must have a seat at any negotiation table. And second, Ukraine alone should determine what territorial concessions, if any, it might be willing to consider. They also united around the belief that if Putin refuses to agree to a ceasefire, Trump will likely respond by imposing fresh sanctions on Russia. 2 additional sources familiar with Wednesday's discussion painted a more optimistic picture. They described European leaders leaving the call feeling genuinely positive about Trump's approach to the Putin meeting. One source specifically noted that achieving a ceasefire will be Trump's top priority during the Alaska summit. The other expressed confidence that Ukrainian territory won't become a bargaining chip without Ukrainian involvement. But here's the million-dollar question that's keeping European officials awake at night. What happens when Trump is actually in that room with Putin? One European official captured this uncertainty perfectly, noting their lingering concern that the president's position could shift dramatically once he's engaged in direct negotiations with the Russian leader. This worry stems partly from what they perceive as Trump's reluctance so far to apply concrete pressure on Russia or follow through on previous sanctions threats. Sometimes these positions change and get revised in a matter of hours. One European official confided, highlighting the unpredictable nature of high-stakes diplomacy. European governments and Ukraine are also grappling with another anxiety, the aftermath management. How will the meeting's outcomes be communicated? Will there be transparency about what was discussed or agreed upon? Will the public receive a clear joint statement explaining the results? When contacted for comment, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt provided a carefully crafted response. The White House does not discuss details of the president's private diplomatic conversations. However, President Trump has been clear that he wants to end this war and stop the killing. and Friday's meeting with President Putin will serve as an important moment in this process. Following Wednesday's call, Trump himself described the conversation as very good and hinted at an intriguing possibility: a rapid-fire second meeting that could include all three leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. Trump explained to reporters, "I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy and myself if they'd like to have me there." The president also issued what amounts to a public ultimatum to Putin, warning that Russia will face severe consequences if the Russian leader refuses to agree to end the war. Adding another layer of reassurance, Vice President J.D. Vance used the call to explicitly promise Zelenskyy and European allies that the United States would never negotiate with Russia about Ukraine's future without including both Ukraine and Europe in those discussions. This commitment came from two German government officials who participated in the call. Later, during remarks to U.S. troops stationed at RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom, Vance emphasized that one of our most important shared security goals in Europe is bringing the Ukraine war to an end. And this is where the controversy really heats up. Is Trump's approach actually the most effective way to end this conflict, or is he potentially walking into Putin's trap? Some argue that engaging directly with Putin gives the Russian leader exactly what he wants: legitimacy and international recognition. Others contend that without direct engagement, the war could drag on indefinitely, costing more Ukrainian lives. What do you think? Is Trump right to meet with Putin directly, even with the risks involved? Or should he maintain distance until Russia shows more concrete signs of wanting genuine peace? The stakes couldn't be higher, and the world is watching. Share your thoughts. Do you believe diplomatic engagement with authoritarian leaders like Putin can actually produce results, or does it simply embolden them further? The comment section awaits your perspective on this diplomatic high-wire act.